The air at the Aegis Solutions Advanced Training Compound had a texture. It was a composite of contradictions, a place where the pristine, almost surgical scent of lakeside pine and damp northern earth was perpetually undercut by the acrid tang of gunpowder, the iron-rich smell of sweat, and the low, guttural thrum of diesel generators. It was a place of polished corporate ambition built atop a bedrock of primal violence. The men who walked its manicured gravel paths were much the same, encased in expensive tactical gear and oozing confidence that was part market-driven bravado, part genuine, hard-won lethality. They were the new breed of warrior, transitioning from the rigid hierarchies of military service to the lucrative, ambiguous world of private security contracting. And they carried themselves with the territorial arrogance of apex predators released into a new, smaller jungle. Among them, she was an anomaly, a miscalculation in their carefully constructed equation of strength. Commander Anya Sharma, retired, was present under the vague and universally dismissed title of Pentagon Liaison and Standards Consultant. To the cadre of instructors and trainees, she was little more than a piece of office furniture with a pulse, a bureaucratic ghost sent to haunt their operational tempo with clipboards and useless reports. She was small, with a compact frame that seemed almost frail when juxtaposed with the hulking figures that surrounded her. Her face was a mask of placid neutrality, her dark eyes missing nothing but revealing less. Most critically, in this temple dedicated to physical perfection and brutal efficacy, she was confined to a wheelchair. It was a sleek, modern piece of engineering, built of carbon fiber and titanium, but it was a cage nonetheless. Her presence was a quiet affront to the compound's core ethos, a constant, unwelcome reminder of fragility in a place that worshipped invincibility. She spent most of her days near the main dock that jutted out into the cold, deep waters of Lake Caspian. She would position her chair at the very edge of the weathered planks, her inert legs stretched out before her, and watch. She watched the trainees run their drills, their movements clumsy and full of wasted energy. She watched the instructors preen and posture, their voices loud with the hollow echo of unearned authority. She observed the subtle currents of the wind on the water's surface, the flight patterns of the local birds, the precise angle of the sun as it arced across the sky. Her stillness was profound. It was not the stillness of passivity, but the coiled, patient stillness of a sniper in a hide, of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The men saw a broken woman in a chair. They did not see the mind behind her eyes, a mind that was even now mapping the compound, identifying structural weaknesses, calculating fields of fire, and assessing every man present not by his rank or his reputation, but by the cold, impartial metrics of operational capability. Rick Jansen, who insisted on being called Rhino, was the compound's self-appointed king. A former Marine Force recon sergeant, he was a monument to brutal physicality. His neck was as thick as a fire hydrant, and his face looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of granite and leather. Authority radiated from him like heat from a furnace, but it was a dry, scorching heat, born not of respect but of intimidation. He moved through the world as if it were a flimsy obstacle to be shouldered aside, and he saw Commander Sharma as the most galling obstacle of all. In his simplistic, binary worldview, there were assets and there were liabilities. There were predators and there were prey. A woman, a commander in name only, bound to a wheelchair, was not just a liability. She was an insult. He saw her as a product of a military he no longer recognized, a politically correct institution that handed out rank for ticking boxes rather than taking lives. Her quiet, constant observation felt like a judgment, and his ego, a vast and fragile edifice, could not bear it. The confrontation, when it came, was as inevitable as the tide. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long, distorted shadows across the dock. Rhino and a half-dozen of his acolytes, younger instructors who mistook his bullying for leadership, were nursing beers after a training exercise. Their laughter was loud and forced, a performance of masculine camaraderie for the benefit of the watching trainees. Sharma was in her usual spot, her gaze fixed on the far shore, seemingly lost in thought. For Rhino, her silent presence was a challenge he could no longer ignore. He felt an irrational surge of anger, the kind of reflexive fury that rises in a bully when his audience is divided. He needed to reassert the natural order of things. He swaggered over to her, his boots thudding on the wooden planks, the sound a deliberate announcement of his approach. His cronies followed, a pack of hyenas sensing a kill. She did not turn. She did not flinch. Her head remained oriented toward the distant trees, her posture unchanged. This infuriating lack of reaction was gasoline on the fire of his insecurity. "Enjoying the view, Commander?" he began, his voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was more menacing than any shout. "Or are you taking notes for your next report? Day 47. The real soldiers did some work. I watched." She finally turned her head, a slow, deliberate motion. Her eyes met his. There was no fear in them. There was no anger. There was a profound, unnerving emptiness, a clinical disinterest that he found more insulting than any retort. It was the look a scientist might give a microbe under a microscope just before dissecting it. "I am observing training protocols, Mr. Johnson," she said. Her voice was level, calm, and precise, each word a perfectly calibrated instrument. The use of Mr. was a deliberate surgical strike against his inflated sense of status. The slight stung him more than he would ever admit. "It's Rhino, ma'am," he growled, leaning in, invading her personal space. The smell of stale beer and arrogance washed over her. "And what would you know about protocols? The real ones, I mean. The ones that get written in blood and sweat, not in some cushy office at the Pentagon." He gestured vaguely at her legs. "Looks like your last field exercise didn't go so well. Must have tripped over a staple remover." His men snickered, the sound ugly and sycophantic. The trainees scattered around the edge of the dock fell silent, their eyes wide. They were watching a public execution, a raw display of the compound's brutal pecking order. They knew this was wrong, but they also knew the price of crossing Rhino Johnson. Sharma's expression did not change. She was a lioness allowing a jackal to dance at the edge of its kill radius, measuring its stupidity, cataloging its every mistake for a reckoning that was not yet due. This absolute calm was the one thing Rhino's arsenal of intimidation could not defeat. He needed a reaction. He needed her to cry, to scream, to protest. He needed her to validate his power by showing her weakness. Her serenity was a denial of his dominance, and it drove him into a state of blind, witless rage. "You know what the problem is with you desk jockeys?" he spat, his face turning a blotchy red. "You sit up in your ivory towers, passing judgment on men you could never be. You're a ghost, a box ticker. You don't belong here." He looked from her impassive face to the wheelchair, a symbol of everything he despised. An idea, ugly and brutish, bloomed in his mind. This place is for warriors, for people who can stand on their own 2 feet. He nodded to 2 of his largest sycophants. "Let's lighten her load a bit." She's been carrying this thing around all day. Understanding dawned on their dull faces, followed by cruel grins. Before anyone could process the sheer audacity of the act, they moved. One grabbed the wheelchair by its handles, the other by the footrests. Sharma remained seated on the dock planking, her body a still point in the sudden, violent motion. She made no move to stop them, no sound of protest. Her eyes remained locked on Rhino's, and in them, for the first time, he saw a flicker of something. It was not fear. It was pity. With a collective grunt, they swung the expensive, custom-built wheelchair in a low arc. It seemed to hang in the air for a moment, a dark skeleton against the bright, indifferent sky. Then it hit the water with a hollow splash that echoed across the silent compound. It floated for a second, then the weight of its specialized components pulled it under. A stream of bubbles marked its descent into the cold, black depths. Rhino stood over her, his chest puffed out, a triumphant sneer on his face. He had done it. He had put the ghost in her place. He had proven his dominance. He left her there, sitting on the rough wood of the dock, her useless legs a testament to his victory, a broken queen dethroned. The onlookers, a chorus of silent, shamed men, began to disperse, unwilling to meet her gaze, complicit in their cowardice. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind and the gentle lapping of the water against the pylons, a quiet soundtrack to an act of profound and catastrophic ignorance. The universe, however, has a penchant for irony. It delights in using moments of supreme hubris as the stage for sudden, violent education. Just as the last bubble from Sharma's submerged chair broke the surface, a sound tore through the quiet afternoon. It was not a sound that belonged in this carefully controlled environment. It was a sharp, percussive crack, followed by the sickening crunch of metal and fiberglass, and then a chorus of panicked, terrified screams from the far side of the lake. Every head snapped in that direction. A mile out, where a team of trainees had been conducting a small boat insertion drill, there was chaos. A sudden, vicious microburst, a freak weather event born of the lake's unique thermal dynamics, had descended upon them without warning. Their small, rigid-hulled, inflatable boat was overturned, a dark belly in a froth of white water. Men were scattered in the churning lake, their heads bobbing like dark apples. One moment, it had been a routine exercise. The next, it was a mass casualty event in the making. Panic, a cold and greasy serpent, slithered through the crowd on the dock. The veneer of professional competence dissolved instantly. Rhino Jansen, the self-proclaimed king, was the first to succumb. His response was pure, undirected aggression. "What the hell was that? Get on the comms! Somebody get the rescue boat! Go! Go! Go!" he bellowed, his voice loud, but his orders useless. He was a bull in a china shop, all noise and fury, creating more confusion than he resolved. Other instructors began shouting as well, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of ineffective commands. "Get a rope!" one yelled. "I see 3 in the water!" screamed another. "Are they wearing life vests?" They were reacting, not thinking, their training evaporating in the face of a genuine, unscripted crisis. While they scrambled and shouted, creating a vortex of headless chicken panic, Anya Sharma moved. She did not rise. She could not. But she was no longer still. With a fluid, economical motion that spoke of immense, disciplined strength, she pushed herself forward off the edge of the dock, where she sat, and onto her stomach. The men who happened to glance her way saw a startling transformation. The loose civilian jacket she wore pulled tight across her back, revealing a stunning landscape of muscle. Her shoulders, her back, her arms. They were not the atrophied limbs of an invalid, but the densely corded, brutally efficient machinery of a lifetime spent in peak physical condition. She was a weapon from the waist up. Ignoring the splinters and rough texture of the dock, she dragged herself to the very edge with the powerful, rhythmic pull of her arms, like a sea turtle moving toward the surf. It was not a crawl of desperation. It was a movement of pure, unadulterated purpose. She reached the edge and stopped, her eyes already scanning the disaster zone, her mind a whirlwind of cold, instantaneous calculation. The panic, the shouting, the chaos. It was all just data to her now. Then her voice cut through the bedlam. It was not a shout. It was a clear, calm, and utterly commanding tone that sliced through the noise like a scalpel through flesh. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed without question in the heart of life or death situations. "Jansen, shut your mouth!" The sheer, unexpected authority in those 4 words was a physical shock. Rhino, who had been in the middle of screaming at a trainee to find a boat key, froze and turned, his mouth agape. Every other man on the dock fell silent, their attention snapping from the crisis on the water to the woman lying on the edge of the pier. "You are screaming," she continued, her voice never rising, yet seeming to fill the entire space. "You are injecting panic into a tactical situation. You are a liability. From this moment on, you will speak only to repeat my orders. Do you understand me?" Rhino was too stunned to respond. His entire reality had just been inverted. The broken woman was now giving him orders with an authority that dwarfed his own. Sharma did not wait for his answer. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, her attention back on the water. She began issuing a stream of commands, each one precise, logical, and impossibly clear. It was a foreign language of expertise, a masterclass in crisis management that left everyone else looking like frightened children. "Davies!" she barked, her eyes locking onto a young instructor fumbling with a coil of rope. "You are holding a 70-meter, 8mm dynamic rope. I need a running bowline secured to that starboard pylon. You have 10 seconds. Go." Davies, who had been about to just throw the rope uselessly into the water, stared for a beat. Then his training kicked in and he moved, his hands suddenly sure and steady. "Miller!" she called out, pointing a finger at a trainee who was an ex-Navy corpsman. "Medical Shed Alpha. You will find a C-spine collar, a backboard, and 2 hypothermia blankets. Bring them to my position. You have 90 seconds. Miller took off at a dead sprint without a word. "Jones, the armory. There is a Mark IV thermal imager on the 2nd shelf. Power it on and bring it here. I need a real-time heat map of that water to locate any submerged personnel. Move!" The effect was mesmerizing. She was transforming chaos into order, panic into purposeful action. She saw a man in the water, clearly in shock, beginning to flounder. "You! In the water! The man with the red shirt! Look at me!" she commanded, her voice carrying effortlessly across the distance. The man's panicked eyes found her. "Your name is Peterson. You have a dislocated right shoulder. Do not try to swim with it. Your life vest will keep you afloat. Control your breathing. In for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds. Do it with me. Now." She began to breathe in an exaggerated, audible rhythm, and across the water, the panicked man began to match her, his frantic movements subsiding into a manageable float. Rhino Jansen stood frozen, a useless statue of a leader. He was watching a level of competence so far beyond his own that he could barely comprehend it. This was not management. This was command. This was not a reaction. It was total control. She was on her stomach, unable to move from a 3-foot section of wood. Yet she was commanding a complex, multifaceted rescue operation with more efficiency than a fully staffed command center. She was a central processing unit, her brain a supercomputer running threat assessments, resource allocation models, and medical triage protocols simultaneously. The world had shrunk to this single point of action, and she was its unblinking, omniscient center. The other instructors, humbled and silent, now moved only when she spoke, grateful for the clarity and direction she provided. The rescue boat was finally launched, but not before Sharma had given its pilot a precise vector, accounting for wind speed and current, to reach the most critical victims first. She directed the men with the rope to retrieve a victim who was close to shore but entangled in submerged debris. Every instruction was perfect. Every decision was optimal. She saved them. From a prone position on a splintered dock, with the symbol of her supposed weakness rusting at the bottom of the lake, Anya Sharma single-handedly saved the lives of 6 men. As the last of the trainees were being pulled from the frigid water, a new sound intruded. The deep, rhythmic whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of a heavy helicopter. It was not one of the compound's light utility choppers. This was a Sikorsky HH-60 Pavehawk, a military-grade combat search and rescue aircraft, painted in slate gray and bearing the insignia of the United States Navy. It descended with terrifying speed and precision, its rotor wash whipping the lake's surface into a frenzy and blasting the men on the dock with a hurricane of wind. It did not land at the designated helipad. Instead, it touched down on the main lawn, a flagrant and authoritative violation of the compound's protocols. The side door slid open, and a figure emerged, ducking under the still spinning blades. He was an older man, tall and ramrod straight, dressed in the civilian equivalent of a uniform, a crisp navy blue blazer, gray slacks, and impeccably polished shoes. His face looked like it had been carved from naval tradition itself, all sharp angles and quiet, unassailable authority. It was General Marcus Morrison, retired 4-star Marine, Medal of Honor recipient, and the founder and CEO of Aegis Solutions. His arrival was an event of seismic significance, and for him to arrive in a military aircraft meant something of monumental importance was happening. Morrison's eyes, the color of chipped steel, swept across the scene. He took in the overturned boat, the drenched and shivering trainees, the instructors moving with newfound purpose. He saw Rhino Jansen standing dumbly, his face a mask of confusion and dawning dread. And then he saw her. He saw the small woman lying on her stomach at the edge of the dock, still calmly issuing quiet instructions to the medic attending to a survivor. He strode forward, his pace unwavering, his purpose absolute. He ignored everyone. He walked past Johnson as if he were a piece of furniture. He did not stop until he was standing at the edge of the dock, just behind Anya Sharma. The entire compound held its breath. What was happening was beyond their comprehension. General Morrison looked down at the woman who had just orchestrated a flawless rescue. He observed the scene for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he did something that shattered the world of every man watching. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. He brought his heels together with a sharp, explosive crack that echoed over the water. He raised his right hand in the sharpest, most impeccably correct salute he had rendered in his entire storied career. It was a gesture of profound, almost reverent respect, the kind a soldier gives not just to a superior officer, but to a living legend. "Commander Sharma," he said, his voice a low, powerful baritone that carried the weight of decades of command. On deck. The effect was like a bolt of lightning. The muscle memory of 100,000 mornings of formation kicked in. Every ex-military man present, from the lowest trainee to the highest-ranking instructor, snapped to the position of attention as if a single electric current had passed through them all. Their backs straightened, their chins tucked, their eyes locked forward. They stood rigid, a silent, stunned army paying deference to a commander they hadn't even known they had. Morrison held his salute for a long, pregnant moment before dropping his hand. He then turned his gaze, cold and hard as a glacier, upon Rhino Jansen. "Mr. Jansen," he began, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" Rhino's face had gone from red to a sickly, mottled white. He could only shake his head, his throat too tight to form words. "I didn't think so," Morrison continued, his voice laced with contempt. "You stand there, wrapped in $10,000 of tactical gear and 100 pounds of unearned confidence, and you look at a hero. You don't see her, of course. You see a wheelchair. You see a woman. You see weakness. Your vision is critically, perhaps fatally, flawed." He took a step closer to Rhino, forcing the larger man to shrink back. "Let me educate you. That is Commander Anya Sharma of the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Does that name mean anything to you, Jansen? DevGru, no? I imagine not. It's not the sort of thing they brag about in Force Recon mess halls." He paused, letting the weight of the designation settle. DevGru, SEAL Team 6, the most elite, secretive, and lethal fighting force in the American arsenal. It was a name spoken only in whispers. "But they have another name for her," Morrison went on, his voice now taking on a reverent, almost mythic tone. "In the quiet, dark places where the real monsters live, they call her Kali. Have you heard that name, Johnson?" A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the assembled men. Kali. It was a call sign from a ghost story, a legend told to scare new Special Forces candidates. Kali, the strategist who planned Operation Nightfall, the raid that dismantled an entire terror network in one night without a single friendly casualty. Kali, the operator who, during the Zargos ambush, held off an enemy force of over 50 insurgents alone for 2 hours, with only a sidearm and a combat knife until reinforcements could arrive. Kali, the officer who had earned the Navy Cross for pulling 3 of her wounded men from a burning vehicle under direct machine gun fire, an act of valor that had cost her the use of her legs when an IED detonated just as she dragged the last man clear. "She is not here as a consultant, Jansen." Morrison's voice was like the tolling of a funeral bell for Rhino's career. "She is here, at my personal and desperate request, to evaluate whether this entire company, from me down to the lowest recruit, is worthy of holding its Tier 1 government contracts. She is the final exam. She is the living standard against which we are all being measured. And today, Mr. Jansen, you have failed that exam in a more spectacular fashion than I have ever witnessed in 50 years of service." The truth descended on the dock like a physical weight, crushing the air from Rhino's lungs. He looked at the woman, who was now being gently helped up by General Morrison's aide. He wasn't seeing a victim anymore. He was seeing a goddess of war in a mortal shell, a being whose quietest whisper carried more authority than his loudest roar. The pity he had seen in her eyes before, he understood it now. It was the pity of a vastly superior being for a loud, ignorant creature about to make a terminal mistake. Later, after the rescued trainees had been treated and the chaos had subsided, Sharma sat in her retrieved wheelchair, which had been hauled from the lake, dripping and slightly bent. Her team had already field-stripped, cleaned, and repaired it with practiced efficiency. She wheeled herself to where Rhino Johnson stood, isolated and broken, awaiting his fate. General Morrison stood beside her, his face a thundercloud. Sharma looked up at the man who had humiliated her. Her face was, as always, a calm, neutral mask. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction. There was only a clinical assessment. "Your actions today, Mr. Jansen, were not a personal insult," she began, her voice quiet, but carrying the force of a final judgment. "A personal insult is irrelevant. It is data, nothing more. Your actions constituted a critical tactical failure. Your prejudice prevented you from accurately assessing your environment. Your ego blinded you to the presence of a superior asset. Your emotional incontinence compromised the operational readiness of every man on this dock. In a real-world scenario, your behavior would have gotten men killed. You are not just a bully. You are a vulnerability, a weak link." Morrison stepped forward. "You're finished, Jansen. Your contract is terminated. Get your gear and be off this compound by sunrise. You're lucky I don't bring you up on formal charges." "No, General," Sharma said, holding up a hand to stop him. Morrison looked at her, surprised, but deferred instantly. She turned her gaze back to Rhino. "Firing him is an easy solution. It teaches him nothing. He will go to another company, carry the same flawed code inside him, and be a liability there too. He does not need punishment. He needs to be reprogrammed." She looked directly into Rhino's terrified eyes. "Effective tomorrow morning at 0500 hours, you are my new executive aide. You will be assigned to me for the remainder of my evaluation. You will fetch my coffee. You will carry my briefing books. You will push this chair when its batteries are recharging. You will be my shadow. You will sit in every meeting, stand in the back of every debrief, and observe every evaluation. You will see what actual strength looks like. You will learn the difference between loud brutality and quiet competence. You will learn that respect is earned through action, not demanded through volume. You will continue this education until I am satisfied that you are no longer a danger to the men around you. Is that understood?" Rhino could only nod, his throat thick with a shame so profound it was physically painful. He had been offered not an execution, but something far more transformative, a forced and public redemption. He had been broken down to his component parts, and now the very person he had tried to destroy was going to rebuild him. The story of that day passed into the institutional lore of Aegis Solutions. It became known as the Day on the Dock, or, more informally, the day Rhino met Kaylee. It was told to every new class of recruits, a modern military fable about the danger of assumptions. The image of the four-star general saluting the woman in the wheelchair became the company's unofficial coat of arms, a symbol of its new, hard-won philosophy. Substance over style, competence over charisma. Years passed. Rick Jansen was no longer Rhino. The name, and the brutish persona that went with it, had been stripped from him during his year of service to Commander Sharma. He emerged from that crucible a different man, quieter, wiser, more dangerous in a real sense because his strength was now tempered with humility and a sharp, analytical mind honed by a true master. He eventually became the head of training for all of Aegis, a position he filled with a quiet dignity and profound effectiveness that surprised everyone but the woman who had remade him. He often told the story of his own humiliation to new trainees, never sparing himself, never softening the edges of his own catastrophic failure. He used his own shame as his most powerful teaching tool. He would stand before them, a man who now radiated a calm, earned confidence, and tell them about the day he mistook a goddess of war for a broken toy. And he always ended with the same lesson. For the first 6 months, he would say, his voice low and steady, my first duty of every single day was to report to the dock at 0500, strip down to my shorts, and dive into that freezing water. My task was to retrieve a single, small, weighted dive ring that she had me place at the bottom, right where my men had thrown her chair. Every morning, I had to plunge into that cold darkness and bring it back to her. It was my penance. It was my reminder. She never said a word about it. She didn't have to. He would let that sink in before delivering the final moral, the one Anya Sharma had drilled into his very soul. Strength, he would tell the young, eager faces, is not the voice that shouts the loudest. It is not the fist that hits the hardest. True strength is the mind that sees the whole board. It is the will that remains unbroken when the body fails. It is the quiet, calm, professional competence that holds the line when the entire world is coming apart at the seams. Look past the uniform, past the rank, past the vessel. See the operator within. Your life and the lives of those next to you may one day depend on it. The legend of Anya Kali Sharma endured, a testament to a simple, eternal truth. The wheelchair had never been a symbol of her weakness. It was a throne, forged in fire and sacrifice, from which she judged a world of men who had forgotten the true meaning of power. It was a monument to her survival, a constant, silent declaration that the most dangerous weapon on any battlefield is not the one you can see, but the one you underestimate.